Hi, everybody. I'm Brad Kelly, and I'm the regional coordinator for the Society of Biblical Literature's Pacific Coast region. And this is another installment of 7 Good Minutes. Meet our scholars. We think we've got some of the very best folks working in biblical studies out here in the Pacific Coast region. And so this is a chance just to introduce some of our established and emerging scholars we have. And so I'm really excited today to have Dr. Don Benjamin from Arizona State University with me. And Don, thanks for doing this. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Brad. It's good to see you.
Likewise. All right, 7 good minutes. Here we go. Question number 1. I mentioned Arizona State a moment ago. How long have you been there? What do you do there? And any retirement plans? I know that's in the works for you here right quick.
It is. I came west to Arizona State in 1998, so I've been here since then. Before then, from 1978, for that 20 years, I was at Rice University in Houston. And I've always been a contract faculty at both schools. Grant supported or soft money. When Patrice retired in 2013, I thought that sounded like a good idea. And so I geared up to join her in retirement. But then I started getting invitations to write a feminist commentary on Deuteronomy, to do the chapter on Deuteronomy for the 3rd edition of the Jerome Biblical Commentary, to edit the Oxford Handbook of Deuteronomy. And I was really intrigued by these. So she and I sat down and had a come to Jesus moment. And she gave me good advice. She said, you don't play golf. You don't fish and hunt. You're not a sports fan. You're just a guy who likes to read and write and think. So as long as you can do that without pressure, enjoy it. So that's sort of the game plan, is to. And I continue to teach. I also enjoy the teaching, but if I didn't, I wouldn't have library privileges and,
Very good.
So.
Very good. Well, you mentioned this a little bit, but question number 2 is what do you work on just in your scholarship, just kind of generally speaking?
Well, I was trained by Rolf Knierim, and he was a Gerhard von Rad student. So he taught us Old Testament theology. But he also taught us form criticism, which is what we biblical people call folklore studies, that the anthropologists do, but you can't talk like that to people of faith or you won't have any students. So I got into social scientific research through people like Bruce Molina and Norm Gottwald at the national meeting all those years. And then I got very interested in the social scientists, which is the sort of Sitzen-Leben, like what are the social institutions out of which biblical traditions develop? And what do we know about the social institutions that appear in these traditions in the Bible? And one of the spin-offs from that then is my interest in feminist criticism. Not only what were the roles of women in the world of the Bible, but how do the biblical traditions, which are predominantly male, how do fellows think about girls, is another. So that's sort of the evolution, my evolution. Right now I'm working on a project that I would like to argue that the killing of Abel is human sacrifice and not murder. I have nightmares of Augustine coming to my bedside and whispering originals in my ear.
Well, that's actually a good segue, because my third question was going to be whether there was a specific project that you're working on that's got you kind of excited right now. It might be that one, or it might be a certain handbook on the book of Deuteronomy, I imagine, as well.
Well, I'll tell you, I was just reading one of those chapters when you called, and one of my notes to the author is, I wish to hell I had read his chapter before I wrote my own pieces, because working with these 30 scholars from Europe and North and South America, it's like a master class, Brad. I mean, this is not I've been doing Deuteronomy it was my work that I did in graduate school for Rolf. But then the demands of teaching, you can't just teach your dissertation. I generated 5 or 6 courses across the scope of the canon. But reading the work of these people, now I chose them, say, would you like to write this? But what an education. I mean, what an education. And it's tight. I mean, I don't know what your word limit was, but in my volume, it was set at 7,000 by the press. So, I mean, they're not taking a lot of your time, and they're good at what they're doing and creative. So that's
good.
That's been a real, I'm glad I did this.
Yeah, that's great. And this is, for those listening and not knowing what we're talking about, the Oxford Handbook on the Book of Deuteronomy is what we're referencing there. Let me ask you the 4th question. It's a little bit more of a contextual question, but since you've been in Arizona for a while, maybe it resonates a little bit. So question is, what, if anything, do you find exciting or maybe challenging about doing your particular work in the context of the Pacific Coast region, or in your case, specifically, Arizona?
Well, we had quite a stimulating region when I was at Rice. I mean, it in many ways was, more stimulating than the national meeting, which sometimes can be, lost in Disney World without a sense of where the bathrooms are. But when I came west, ours is a much smaller meeting, smaller region, but you had launched the Near Eastern section, which Tammy shepherds these days. And that's a real interest to me, the larger context. And also, you had some very creative ways that we didn't just read papers and stuff. You had always a different format that I like to experiment with different ways of learning. And then over time, I mean, the friendships you build, the networks you create here, because there aren't even seminaries. I mean, there are smaller, exports from California institutions here, but there are religious studies programs at both the University of Arizona and Arizona State, but there's kind of a corridor from the Mexican border to Canada where there aren't institutions unless the ones we interact with the Pacific Coast region. So, and it's stimulating. I mean, I went from a private Ivy League school like Rice, where there were 1,500 undergraduates, to a tier 1 research university like ASU, where we're a tight community of 100,000. Now, I always say I only have to teach them 40 at a time. So, but I've got colleagues who teach 100 or 300 students. I mean, I don't know what they're teaching in the pandemic, but God bless them.
Wow, that is its own excitement, but also challenge, to be sure. Well, we'll get you out of here with this one. The last question's it's a tough one. These are obviously challenging times. What with the COVID-19 pandemic and social and racial injustice and Black Lives Matter and more. You've been at this a while. Any thoughts on being a biblical scholar in this time and context where we find ourselves?
Well, Patrice and I are veterans of the civil rights movement of the 60s, and we have been politically active in progressive politics. So these are sad times for us. But 2 things about my profession. One is the aha moments where, like, for example, this morning, I use at the beginning of my workday a meditation format called Lectio Divina. It's a monastic. And the texts I take are from the readings from the lectionary for the day. And with Ginsburg's death on Friday, I'm really in a dark place and, feel like the dragons at the door. And the Psalm for today is 119. And the aha moment is, I am the audience for this. So there are suddenly moments where working with the text like I do, whether it's prayerfully in meditation or just, as a scholar, where there's suddenly a time link between me and what's going on now and then. And the other thing is, I think my experience has become kind of an empathy. It's almost a hermeneutic for me. I think I better understand, what the people of Yahweh maybe were saying or feeling, or, and their fear of the Egyptians, the Philistines, the Assyrians. There's no end of, that threat. And so that when I read their traditions, both expressing their fears, but also where they're getting hope, this sort of counteracts the sort of anger I have at outrageous interpretations of the Bible that are endorsing sexism and racism and violence. I want to say, hey, put that text down.
Well,
so there you go.
Those are good words. And that, folks, is 7 Good Minutes with Dr. Don Benjamin from Arizona State University. Hope to catch you for the next installment of these before too long. So take good care, everyone.